Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Thank you very much. If you can all hear me, thank you. This is Dr. Gilbert from MNG Research. I will be taking you through today for the process of how to craft an effective literature review. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can.
All right. If you can all see it, then that's fine. So one thing that I want us to start by understanding is that literature review is one of the most challenging chapter if you are doing your postgraduate studies and you are trying to craft your literature review. You will realize that a literature review is not as easy as people might want it to be, and yet it's one of it forms one of the key heartbeats of any research study. So what I'll be taking you through today is a simple guideline to understand, to structure, and to shape you in how you write your literature review. So obviously, one might ask themselves, what is a literature review? Why is it so much important for you, for me to understand a literature review? A literature review is it is a comprehensive summary. Is a comprehensive summary and a synthesis of previous research on a specific topic. So this means whenever you are engaging in a literature review, you are looking at information that has already been published, either in books, articles, dissertations, conference proceedings, and other relevant sources, which might include government websites, government reports, and all other credible online resources. So in any literature review process, it is important for you to understand that a literature review is not just, you cannot just take anything and say, no, I've reviewed literature with this information. For instance, there are various sources like Wikipedia and other, online websites which cannot be verifiable or which are not verifiable. They might be there today, tomorrow you might find that the web page is no longer there. It might be just a blog of a certain individual who is sharing certain information or ideas in which they think they are good and relevant. But it's important that whenever you're engaging a literature review, they say it is crucial to engage what they call peer-reviewed literature. What is peer-reviewed literature? This is information and literature that is drawn from sources that have undergone blind peer review, whereby if you are publishing an article or if an article is published, it has undergone a process whereby 2 or 3 experts in that field have read it, commented, and reflected on it. So when it finally gets published, it's considered a peer-reviewed literature. So you see that most books and most journal articles, they undergo through these processes. So in a literature review, they are saying engage a summary or a synthesis of studies that have been done previously, which are authentic and can give you authoritative insights towards the details that you have to study. So in most cases, this is where challenges come in, because most resources that people might use or people might engage might not be considered as peer-reviewed literature or certifiable information. Hence, some of the claims you might make in your literature review as a justification for your study, or to endorse a certain perspective or a certain approach that you are using in your study, might end up being questionable. And some of those sources are that can make your literature review questionable is some public sources such as Wikipedia and other, sources. But we'll get to discuss some of those things, and we'll get to reflect on some of those things. But basically, this is what you need to understand of what is a literature review. From there are things that I want you to understand, that what is the purpose of one engaging in a literature review. What is key is that whenever you're engaging in a literature review, you need its main purpose and its importance is to help to contextualize your research. It shows you how your work fits into the broader field. If you're doing peace studies, or if you're doing your research topic focusing on youth peace building, or if you're doing your research topic focusing on gender perspectives, if you're doing your studies focusing on how society perceives certain practices, one thing that you need to know is that your literature review needs to reflect at a broader scale, from a global perspective to a regional perspective. If you, that is, if you're in South Africa, or if you're in Nigeria, or if you're in any part of the world, you need also to look at the regional perspectives that shape the narratives of that particular subject in your region, and then you zero into your local context. It might be the broader context of the country, or the local context of the community that you are in, or of the province that you are in. What is previous literature which has been engaged reflect on. So this helps you now to identify the gaps that are in literature, which your study might attempt to address. So you might realize that it's not all the gaps that you'll be able to cover, because your study might end up being everywhere. But literature review helps you to identify the specific gaps that respond to the particular problems or issues you might have identified in your context. So this means your literature review helps you to pinpoint unanswered questions and underexplored areas of your research, so that you can address all those issues in a clear manner. So a literature review also helps to sharpen, to reflect rather, your familiarity with key concepts, theories, and the work of other researchers in your field. What have they identified? What is it that is peculiar in their work, which can help us to understand the key details in this study? And then it also help you to avoid duplication. So whenever you conduct a literature review, you're clear that whatever you're going to produce is not similar to what others have done. So conducting a thorough literature review helps you to avoid duplication of other work that might have been done. And when you submit your dissertation and you are told, no, this similar work has been done somewhere else, then it means you haven't thoroughly, you didn't thoroughly explore your literature, or you didn't do due diligence to understand what are these things that I want to pursue, particularly in my context, has it not been done before? And another thing is that a good literature review helps you to refine your research questions or your hypothesis. It helps you sharpen your focus based on existing literature. So you'd see that a literature review is crucial, not only when you are developing a dissertation, but it's one of the key things that you are supposed to do before you start your proposal. You start by reading articles to develop your proposal. So you see that the literature review is one of the first things you start to do before you develop even a proposal. You start selecting, you start reading, you start understanding key insights, you start understanding different details and different angles that are out there that will help you to shape your own study. So it means by the time you get to shape your research questions or your hypothesis, if you are doing a quantitative study, you have a clear focus on how to sharpen or how to shape your study. So you realize that when you are sharpening your research questions and your hypothesis, it's all developed from the literature you have reviewed. It's all developed from the literature you have engaged and reflected on. So that helps you to shape your objectives, that helps you to shape your research questions and going on. And also, when you do a thorough review of literature, I'm sure for some who have already done their honors, their masters, and who are now doing their PhD, you would realize that whenever you engage literature or whenever you read some articles, you realize that most of the articles in this particular field, they are always quantitative, 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 quantitative. So when you review your literature, it also helps you to shape the kind of methodology you are going to engage, because your methodology might also be a gap that might be in your specific area of focus. You might come across that maybe almost 95% of the studies you are going through have been uh, conducted using quantitative research. And then you realize it seems as if there are no qualitative studies in this particular subject or in this particular area of focus. So I think if I'm to do a qualitative study, it will be groundbreaking. It will provide a new perspective. So a good literature review will help you to shape your methodology or to guide you on what kind of methodology you intend to use in your study. And then that takes us to understand the third thing I want us to understand today, which is types of literature reviews that are out there. Please forgive me, I didn't put detailed notes on these types of literature reviews, but what we will do is some of these explanations will shape them accordingly, according to each and every type of literature review, how it's done and how it's how you can engage it and where, so that it will be easier for you if you want to engage it. And we'll post those details on our YouTube page. But for now, I just try to explain them. And if you have any question, please don't hesitate to ask. But we can engage later on. I will be happy to revisit and explain in detail, if need be, or my colleagues will also chip in to assist in that regard. So you realize that there are many types of literature reviews that can be engaged on. But in this case, I'm just going to focus on 5. The first one being the narrative and traditional literature review, which most of us are doing, especially when we are doing a dissertation, whether it's honors, whether it's masters, whether it's PhD, or even if it's a postgraduate research project. You realize that the narrative or traditional literature review provides a broad overview of a topic, often summarizing different viewpoints and developments over time, and can be subjective based on the author selection. So you realize that whenever you're doing your literature review, remember you would have developed your objectives, you would have developed your research questions, and now when you're engaging the process of writing a literature review, you have to be clear into which literature you're going to include. I've come across, we have come across so many people that get confused because when they are developing a literature, they don't know what to include, and they don't know what to leave out. Because in most cases, people tend to assume that every literature that is out there that speaks something that is similar to what I have, has to be involved. It's not necessarily like that. Whenever you have specific objectives, your objectives should guide you in developing a good literature review. Whether you're still in the proposal stage, whether you're now developing your chapter, your objectives and your research questions, they are your compass, they are your guidelines, they are your parameters, which shape how you engage in a good literature review. So what do you do? What is the main goal in a narrative or a traditional review? The main goal is to summarize, critique, and identify key themes or trends that are taking place in literature. So you realize that in most cases, people just do summarize. So and so argues, so and so presents this, so and so articulates this. Yet that's where the problem begins, because you're not only expected to just summarize what is out there and end there, but you are expected to critique those perspectives. You have to put, you see that as we go, we are going to have simple examples of how you can articulate and engage in some of those perspectives. But what is critical and what is crucial is that you summarize and you critique, and then you identify the key themes and trends. So when you are critiquing, you are bringing different perspectives together, and then reflect that, considering that there is this and there is that, this is the gap, or this is the missing link that most scholars are not talking about. It doesn't mean that if someone is opposing your particular kind of study or your particular kind of approach, it doesn't mean that you are not going to involve that literature. Personally, I have a background in conflict and peace studies. You'd realize that there are various schools of thoughts when it comes to the best approach of engaging in peace building. There are others that argue for liberal peace building. There are others that argue for local peace building approaches. So you'd realize if I'm looking at local peace building approach, I cannot just say because a liberal peace building perspectives they bring a global perspective. It's no longer relevant. No, it's relevant to help to shape why you're saying your local perspective is critical. What is it? What are the elements that are problematic when you bring the liberal to address the local? So those kind of things are very critical when you are doing your literature review. Bring those different perspectives, whether they support or they are against your particular line of thought, but show what scholars are saying and why it is critical for you in your study. Why are these narratives important for the reader or even for anyone who is going to go through your work to understand? Because those elements forms a good literature review. It shows that you know what you are doing. It shows that you understand the debates that are there in the broader perspective. So when do you use a literature review? What do you do? What kind of literature do you engage? You realize that a narrative or a traditional literature review is often used in standalone review articles or in book chapters or as a background in a thesis or a dissertation. So there are other species, even in reports. I've come across different government reports or other different reports where a narrative or a traditional review approach is used. So it means it's widely used in different spaces. But I can bet that most of you are using a narrative or a traditional review in your studies. And then we have a systematic a literature review. A systematic literature review is usually it uses a predefined, rigorous, and reproducible methodology to identify, to appraise, and to synthesize all relevant studies on a specific research question. So its aim, the main aim of a systematic literature review is to reduce bias. So it is a particular goal to help identify a highly reliable and comprehensible answer to a focused clinical or focused research questions. So whenever one engages in a systematic review, it means they have a specific goal that they intend to achieve so that they identify or they debunk a certain myth or certain biases that might be there in terms of particular subject. So I would recommend that if you are doing a systematic review and you are finding having problems, our very own Dr. Mringa is an expert in that. He will be very happy to oblige in assisting you through. And where do you use a systematic review? I've come across that so many studies in health sciences, in most cases, they don't do field work. Or if it's a bigger project, you'd realize that they don't do field work without first publishing a systematic review article. A systematic review article helps them to refine the existing information or the existing studies that are out there and what are the missing gaps in those particular studies. So when they go into the field, they know specifically what they are addressing and what they are looking for. So you see that most publications with systematic reviews, they are found in the health sciences and also in some social sciences, and also those that are involved in policy making. But it requires a detailed protocol using the PRISMA framework or the PRISMA approach. And then we have a meta-analysis. A meta-analysis, it's a type of a systematic review. So, but this one, it uses statistical methods to combine the results of multiple quantitative studies addressing the same question. So its main purpose is to calculate an overall put effect size, providing more precise estimate of the treatment effect or a relationship than any single study. So you also realize that most meta-analysis are engaged when quantitative studies with comparable outcome measures are available. So that's what basically a meta-analysis. And then there is a meta-synthesis. This is another type of a systematic approach to integrate findings from multiple qualitative studies. And it focuses on interpreting and synthesizing themes, concepts, or theories across studies. And the main goal of a meta-synthesis is to develop a deeper, more comprehensive understanding of a phenomenon based on qualitative evidence. And then the last aspect is a scoping review. A scoping review, it usually seeks to map the existing literature on a broad topic area. So it identifies key concepts, sources of evidence, and gaps. And it is often less focused on answering a specific question than a systematic review. So that this is where scoping review differs. A systematic review focuses on answering a specific question or on addressing a specific gap so that it minimizes the bias. But a scoping review, it looks at the broader topic area to identify the concepts, to identify the sources of evidence and the gaps. So it's not seeking to answer any specific question. That's where you need to understand, that's where the differences are drawn. And then the main goal is that whenever one is engaging in a scoping review, they seek to determine the scope and nature of research activity, clarify concepts, or proceed a full systematic review. So, for instance, if you are engaging in a study on youth, you would realize that you are seeking to understand what is it that those people that are that have published on youth, what are they focusing on? What is the broader scope of their focus when they are engaging on when they are publishing work on youth? So you might identify that maybe on 100 articles that have been published on youth, the broader focus of the publications is on unemployment. So that's what a scoping review might help you to do, to identify what are the broader public, what are the existing studies on a particular subject, what are they focusing on? So that will help you now to reflect that, oh, this is the gap that is there. Most studies that are focusing on youth are mainly on unemployment, on the role of youth in development, but not on the other aspects. So with this brief understanding of the types of literature review, that takes us to understand what is the literature review process, a general overview of the review process, a step-by-step approach. When you are involved or when you are engaging a literature review, okay, before I proceed, are there any questions so far? Are we on the same page? Okay, I would assume we are on the same page. All right, so the literature review process, an overview. So you realize that when you are engaging in a literature review, the very first thing, or when you engage yourself in understanding different perspectives that are out there in terms of your research focus, you realize that a literature review, a good literature review will help you to define your topic and your scope. So it assists you to narrow your study down, to identify the key area that you are going to be engaging in, the specific angle that you are bringing into the study, because that's very crucial. Most of the times you see that the reason why people fail to articulate the key issues of what they want to study is that many times people just say, I want this study topic. I want to address A, B, C, D, and E, but without going through at least several articles, not even going through the abstracts to understand what is it that other people have published, what is it that is out there, and how is my study going to be different. And yes, it's good to identify the problem, maybe from your area of work or from your surrounding communities, and to say, no, I've identified a practical problem, maybe in a government a department or so. And then you say, I want to do my study focusing on that. Yes, that might be a good approach, but it's also a challenge if you haven't gone through different studies, because you might say that's what you want to do, and then you find that someone is already done a study on that, and the heartbreak that you have from there, knowing that now I have to start again. So going through other articles and other published dissertations and sources out there will help you now to identify, okay, this is what is missing, because some of the articles, they have recommendations for future studies. So look at some of those recommendations for future studies and start shaping your study from there. That will help you to define your scope and your topic, and also have clear research questions of what your study will address and what your review will be doing. And then the second important thing is that searching for literature. So it is important that you develop a systematic search strategy to find relevant sources. So you see one of the next workshops that we are going to be engaging is on how to write your literature review using AI tools. We already have a workshop that we did last year, which is on YouTube. Can go through it before we get into the second one. This second one that we are going to be engaging is more refined, and it has more examples, and it will definitely help you to search for relevant literature. But before we go into other details of AI and whatnot, which you are going to engage in our later workshops, what's critical is know how to search for relevant literature. Know your Google Scholar, your different JSTOR, your Subnet search, your library searches. Those things, your librarians in different universities, they are there to help you for free. You don't pay to be assisted on how to search for relevant literature in the different libraries across universities. So that's very important. Utilize those resources so that you know how to search for relevant literature. Trust me, if you know how to search for relevant literature, it will help you on verifying certain information or certain details that you might come across when you are utilizing even AI tools. But from there, you need to understand how to evaluate your research sources. So you realize that in literature, most universities or your professor might have warned you that they are predatory journals. We don't want you to publish work that is from predatory journals. Well, it's a bit challenging nowadays to identify some of those, but you realize that in most cases, you realize that whenever you are going through a literature search, uh, remember what we mentioned earlier on, that it's always important that whenever you are looking for journals or for sources to use, they are peer-reviewed articles. Those peer-reviewed articles, they form part and parcel of good quality journal articles. And that's very important for you to understand. Whenever you are going through Google Scholar, it helps you. It also indicates some of the articles that are peer-reviewed and whatnot. And you realize that there are different accredited platforms whereby you can access and download some of the journals. One thing that can help you, for instance, there is a DHET list that is there of accredited journals or of accredited sources of publications that you can look for good literature from. So that will help you to lessen the burden of how then do I find, quality, relevant, and credible resources for my study. And also learn to identify themes, debates, and gaps. Whenever you're engaging in your literature review, the key theme that should guide you is, well, you have your clear table whereby you indicate what are the debates that are in some of the studies that I have gone through. So and so pushes this debate and has these different themes, and they identify this gap. So in most cases, there is that literature review table that sometimes people develop. It can help you in identifying these key things, the keywords and the whatnot. Usually, in most systematic reviews, people will develop that table to guide them through the process. But it's not only for systematic review, but it just helps you to identify the key themes, the debates, and the gaps. That way, it will make it easier for you now when you are writing your literature review to know these are the main debates that have been put across, and these are some of the arguments, but these are the missing gaps which are common from the different publications. And then it's important whenever you're doing a literature review to have a well-defined structure that mainly it's important that you organize your literature either thematically, chronologically, or methodologically, but it depends on how you want it to reflect. My preferred style is to use the structures within my research objectives. That will help me to organize my literature review in a more structured manner and in a more organized manner, that if you can read it and it makes sense, and if someone can read it, your friend or your colleague, and it makes sense, then chances are your supervisor will also be able to follow. The challenge is sometimes people send work that they are not even sure of. They don't know where it's coming from and where it's going. Everything is everywhere. And obviously, if it confuses you, chances are it will also confuse the person who's going to review your work. So whenever you write your literature review, it will help you to synthesize the findings. And what you need to do is ensure that in your writing, you properly reflect what are the key findings and how do they inform certain debates. So that's very important. Don't just summarize what are the findings out there. Have a clear critical engagement, as we mentioned and reflected on earlier. This will help you to build your arguments, and also it will help you to connect the different ideas that scholars have put across out there. And also another important thing is that you need to cite your work properly. Make sure you understand your style of referencing at your particular university. Different universities, they use different types of referencing styles. Others use Harvard, others use APA, others use Chicago style. So understand which type of style does your university use. Sometimes one of the biggest challenges is that you realize that most people, they know they might be good in developing and doing their work, but now their referencing is everywhere. Here they are using Chicago, here they are using APA, and then the next they are using Harvard, and in their reference list, and it confuses everything. And others, they just copy and paste the reference from their source, from their particular sources. They don't even check what kind of referencing style is being used. So ensure that you align your referencing with the style of referencing that is being used at your university, so that will save you from unnecessary trouble and problems. So from there, we get to understand crafting your research strategy. So how do you get to search for relevant literature? How do you get to understand and identify key information? One important thing is you understand the keywords that shape your study, your particular area of study. What are the keywords that you are looking for? Obviously, when you've gone through several studies, or when you have just read one or two, you understand that there are certain keywords that can guide you in searching for your relevant literature, whether it's on Google Scholar, whether it's on PubMed, whether it's JSTOR, whether it's Corpus, all those platforms, you need to understand what you are looking for. As I mentioned earlier, it's important for you to engage your librarian. If you have access to your university library every day, or if you happen to go there here and there, understand these things. Every university has a moment whereby they train people how to search on their library database. So understanding how to search on the library database is very important, because that's how you identify some of the good quality literature. And in the process of searching, there is what they call the Boolean operators. This is whereby if you find 6 or 7 keywords, you can add them in the process of your of in your search, and then in your search command. That will help you to identify some of the specific literature, that is the specific keywords that you are looking for. So that's very crucial and important. But obviously, this is not one of the main purposes of our presentation today, but we saw it relevant and fit so that you understand that there is a manual process of searching for literature, and it's you sometimes you just don't arrive. You have to utilize some of the resources that the university has made available for you. Of course, nowadays, some would say, "Hey, it doesn't matter. I will use some AI powered platforms like Consensus and this and that." But it's important for you to understand these particular things in the event that maybe that day you don't have access to some of those platforms, but you have your usual platforms that are there. Understand them, because if you understand that, it will still help you to. And obviously, some of these platforms, they also now have they are now AI powered, and they will help you to summarize some of the relevant information that is there. And always understand what is it that you are looking for. Because when you are able to define your particular kind of studies, it's easier to search. Sometimes you might find that you are searching for literature, and then because you don't have a definitive criteria of what you are including in your study, you might find that some studies might pop up. They have an English abstract, but the entire article is in Chinese, or it's in French, or it's in any other language that you can. So it's important for you to know that these are the kind of articles that I'm looking for. And obviously, when you are doing a systematic literature review, that's very critical, and that's very important. And then whenever you read a literature review, or I mean, whenever you read a certain article, it's always important for you to also go in the reference list and read. This was always my trick and our trick when we were doing, undergrad. That whenever we'll be taught, your assignment has to have 15 or 20 articles, 20 references. And I'm thinking, where am I going to get all those 20 references? You have only given us 2 articles in the course spec. So simply go to the reference list and check. We'll do a snowball. So that's very important. We'll check there and we say, okay, then we'll search. So it always helps you to look for relevant and key sources that are critical. And that's very important. And one other important thing is it's always important to keep detailed records. I will tell you an example of recently I came across someone who had done their study, and they are done. And then when their study went for examination, I maybe it was picked for assessment, and then they were asking, can you provide us with a list of databases you used? And they did. Can you provide us with the dates that you downloaded some of these articles? Can you take the screenshots of the process? and then you realize that some of the things that you didn't consider to be important, you now realize that these are some of the things that I didn't consider to be important, but they are needed, and it will be at a critical time. So it's always important to ensure that you either find ways of saving your work. You can create a comprehensive list. You can create a good database. There are also other reference management softwares that you can use to manage or to organize your sources. But you can do it manually. Whenever you read something or you come across something, uh, you take your article, you put it in your folder, you save it in different folders. You save different articles in different folders. You compile your reference list whenever you write a section or a chapter or a paragraph. You put your references on the side so that you won't lose them. And if possible, whenever you download an article or just make sure you also take the link. That way it will be easier. It will take you back to that particular link that you used or that you searched on that day. So that's important as well. So from there, that takes us to the final step for today. The final step for today that I want us to understand, that is evaluating and synthesizing sources, moving beyond the summary. Evaluating and synthesizing sources. So this is mostly about how do you write your literature review? How do you write your literature review? So obviously the first thing is whenever you read, what is it that you are drawing from a particular article? What is it that you are identifying from a specific article? Do you agree with them? You might find an article that might be speaking or talking about maybe your organization, or that might have been published focusing on your particular community. And just because it's published, it doesn't mean that maybe the perspectives that are there, it doesn't mean that they entirely represent what is happening. So whenever you go through an article or you go, it doesn't entirely mean that whatever is published there, it's entirely representative of everything that is in that particular context, or is entirely representative of a particular ideology or of a particular position. So reading has to provoke you to ask different kinds of questions. Are you satisfied with the methodology that was used? Are you satisfied with the conclusions and the findings that are being presented in the particular article? What do you think are the strengths and the limitation of that particular study? Those are the things. Those are the kind of questions that should be, rising in your thoughts, rising in your perspectives, so that you question some of the things. That critical approach will help you to not to look at things from just a face value. And also question this article that I'm reading, is it are these perspectives in line with what other the other scholars in this field? You might find that some scholars might be in the same field, but they do not agree on the certain types of arguments. Being from a political science, having a political science background, I know for sure that There are various debates that exist in politics. We don't need to. Obviously, if one looks at the political debates that takes place around us every day, you definitely see that this is not just about being in different political parties. It's also about their position, their line of thinking, how they perceive the economics of the country, how they look at the development approaches of the country, how they position themselves in international relations. All those things are very important. The same goes in whenever you are reading. Sometimes what scholars are presenting, it's not just the critical problems in a society. They might also be pushing a particular ideological narrative, and you need to take a cognizance of those kind of issues whenever you are reading. What is the theoretical presentation in this particular work? What is the methodological approach? Is the methodology helping to amplify the findings that are there, or some of the perspectives that are being put in this particular study? What is the significance of this study? Not only in the broader context of the society, but in your study interests. What do you think this particular study is informing? So you realize that if you want to have a good literature review, whenever you're reading articles and you're noting these kind of things, you will be able to move beyond just summarizing the results. You can now engage in critical engagement, whereby when you are identifying your themes, you are identifying themes that are reflecting on the broader ideas that are coming from different scholars and authors. This one is saying this one is saying this under this particular theme. However, in their emphasis of these particular ideas, they are missing on A, B, C, D, and E. So that makes your literature review more synthesized and more organized in amplifying the key ideas that are out there and the missing gaps from the presentations and arguments that are being presented. So as you read, as you take notes, as you look at different recurring ideas, concepts, theories, methods, findings, and controversies, it is important for you to note where the evidence is lacking or conflicting in the presentations of different authors. When you present those kinds of ideas or thoughts in your paragraphs and in different thematic presentations that you are doing in your literature review, you identify that, you realize that you have a good literature review that is able to reflect on key issues. And then it's also important that whenever you're engaging, have a clear outline before you start writing your literature review, or have a matrix. I mentioned something before about having a clear table that will help you identify. That's where you can put in these debates, these agreements, these differences, so that when you organize your literature review, or when you begin to write your literature review, it becomes easier. You realize that if you go through our training on how to develop literature review using AI, which is on YouTube, you see that Dr. Mringa was explaining some of the steps of how you, before you write anything, how you create key summaries. And from those key summaries, you then begin to weave the ideas together. So I would recommend that you go and look for that YouTube video, and you can also share it in the link. Tatenda, you can also share it in the link so that our colleagues can get to see it. So that's very important. So obviously from there, it's always important that how you structure your literature review. Your literature review has to be logical. Obviously, it should have an introduction and have the body and the conclusion. But the key issues that we have mentioned before is that make sure that your presentation is well focused. You can define how it goes if it's a traditional or narrative literature review. And one way you can make it clear is obviously by using themes, a thematic approach, and also by let those themes be guided by by your your objectives. Or others, they do it in a chronological manner whereby they are presenting literature according to the time it was published. You start maybe by reflecting on ideas that were there in the key debates that were dominant in 2019, and then and then from there you start reflecting on the other that were there in 2020. And then by the time you finish, you are reflecting on what has changed, and all those kind of things. But it all depends with how useful and how good you are in presenting your historical trends. And then others, they choose a methodological approach of presenting literature whereby they are focusing on the key methodological the key research methods that were used. And others might use a theoretical approach. So there are different ways of structuring your literature review. And that being said, I think for today, this is where we come to an end. So thank you, colleagues, for your time. And I think we can have some questions and reflections. Hello. Are there any questions?
No, we don't have questions, but we